Hello again, Chris Cavelli here to show you more about species. In our last video, I gave you a basic overview of our beta features. In this video, I'll give you a detailed walkthrough of each of our current tools, explaining how they work and how they can help you create characters faster and with less technical overhead. Once you've installed Species, you can find all of its tools in this top menu here. I'm just going to tear off this window so we have all the tools ready to go. The first tool we're going to take a look at is Create S-Sphere. Once I click on this, you'll see a sphere create at the origin. So this is not a traditional polygon sphere like you can create with Maya's Create menus. This is a proprietary tool we've created for Species. It contains transformation values, and it also contains these attributes here in the channel box. We'll get into those in a bit. Just know that they're there for now. The next tool we're going to take a look at is Start Creation Mode. Once I click on this, you'll see a readout appear at the top of Maya's viewport. These are hotkeys that will make it easier as you give structure to your character. So left click and drag, you can move spheres throughout the viewport. And then shift left click, and that will branch off new spheres and will allow you to sort of create a chain hierarchy. You'll notice as I'm moving these spheres around, their children are moving as well, according to the basic hierarchy we're setting up. It is possible to move them independently by control left clicking. This will move spheres while ignoring the hierarchy. And that's pretty handy. You can, kind of switch between these two modes as you work. You'll also notice as we're moving things around, we're working with symmetry. Moving things on the left moves them on the right as well. This is happening because our central node is snapped to the x-axis. This is a feature of creation mode where you can easily snap nodes to the x-axis, and as long as they're snapped, their children can be created and adjusted with symmetry. Now, if you want to introduce asymmetry, all you need to do is just move your central nodes off the x-axis, and you'll be able to work without symmetry. You may want to exit creation mode for this. The snapping is very handy, but let's say you only want to move this sphere very slightly off the x-axis. The snapping has a certain threshold and is preventing you from doing that. So you can exit creation mode just by hitting Q or W or any of the transformation tools, and then you can move this guy over with a little more precision. You can get back to creation mode just by clicking on it again, and you'll see we're still able to work without symmetry. I'm going to continue to work with symmetry just to make things easier for this demo. At any point in your work, you can use this Add S-Mesh button to generate procedural geometry that will update in real time to any adjustments you make to your spheres. And if I just have my initial sphere selected and click on it, we get a mesh. I'm just going to turn on wireframe so you can see as I continue to manipulate the spheres. It's creating new edge loops. This is a live mesh. It's procedurally generated and updating as we go. Now, if you select the mesh, you'll find in the channel box we have these inputs under S-Mesh1. So evolve iterations, that'll act as your subdivision level, and it goes to a maximum of 3. Evolve strength, that will determine how closely the mesh adheres to the silhouette of your spheres. So it's already at a maximum of 1, and as I dial that down, you can see it's sort of deviating from the shape of the spheres. Finally, relax is just as simple as it sounds. It'll average out the vertices and relax your mesh. You're free to use whatever combination of values works best for you, and you're free to get back into creation mode and continue to adjust and create more nodes. Looks like I'm ending up with a quadruped here. Now that we have a mesh attached to our character, there are a few more hotkeys in creation mode that you'll be able to see a bit more clearly now. You can scale spheres by middle clicking and dragging. And as I scale the spheres, you'll see it's adjusting the volume of our mesh. Now, middle clicking and dragging will scale spheres uniformly, but it is possible to scale them non-uniformly as well. If I hold Shift and middle click and drag, you can see that it's scaling the spheres according to one radius. And if I hold Control and middle click drag, that'll scale according to the opposite radius. And with this, it's possible to add some more variety with like non-perfectly spherical sort of oblong shapes to your character. Another hotkey is Control, Shift, and middle click, and that will twist the spheres, which will in turn sort of roll the geometry, and that'll be useful for things like wrists, any parts that need to twist a good deal. And then the last hotkey we're going to take a look at is Control Shift left click. And what that will do is that will insert spheres between two that are already created. This is very useful for working non-linearly. For example, if I create a tail that's really long, and I decide I want more joint divisions in between, I can just set the length with just these two spheres, and then I can add more to add more points of articulation. And you can also use the same Control Shift left click to remove spheres as well. The next tool we're going to look at is this Create S Influence. If I click on that, you'll see another sphere appear at the origin. This one is colored pink or magenta to differentiate it from the S spheres. The purpose of this sphere is to affect the mesh only. It doesn't have anything to do with the underlying skeletal structure, your S spheres. It's just meant to be sort of free-form shapes that can affect the mass of your character. To make them work, all we need to do is parent them anywhere within the S sphere hierarchy. So I'm just going to put them under the root node, and you can see right away that the mesh reacts to it. Now, if I select the mesh and turn up the iterations, you'll see that it does a little bit of a better job of conforming around the sphere with more mesh resolution. There's actually two ways we can interact with these. And it almost works like, you can almost consider these sort of a Boolean type of object. At shallow depths, where we cross the mesh surface, you can see that it's pushing in and actually creating a negative space. And it's not until we get sort of like past the halfway point that the mesh attempts to envelop it. So yeah, that's a couple of different ways to use these to give you sort of more range of the kind of shapes that you can make. And you're free to duplicate these around, move them wherever you'd like to see them. They're as long as they're parented within the hierarchy, it should all work. So that covers all the tools you'll need to construct and shape your character. Now, let's look at our posing and testing tools. If I select our root node and go to this add controls, that will add a series of FK controls for each of our S spheres. You can use these controls to pose your character and sort of see how it looks in different poses. You'll want to use rotation since we're dealing with FK. And with this tool, we're just using it to test some poses and see how the character is going to be able to move. So let's, for argument's sake, say that this were a biped character with an arm rather than a front leg, and we'd probably want the two sections of this limb to be equidistant. So if he had hands, he'd be able to touch his shoulders and do all the other things that you should be able to do with an arm. Obviously, what we have here isn't working, but we can actually continue to adjust the proportions of our character even in this pose. You'll notice that as we're posing, we're leaving behind our spheres. But we can still use them to adjust the proportions of our character. So if I just grab this and move it, you can see that we can very easily fix sort of any performance issues that we might find while posing our character. And we can do this in the very poses that we're testing. So that creates something very, very handy for us. So to delete these controls, all I'd have to do is once again select our root node, and we can go to remove controls, and that will remove the controls and set the mesh back to our original pose aligned with all of the spheres. It is possible to create controls on just a section of this character as well. We originally selected the root node, so it made controls everywhere. If we just selected, say, this leg and added controls there, it would only add the controls for the node we selected and all of its children. We've covered quite a bit here so far. The last thing to go over are all these options found in the channel box that we mentioned at the start of this video. These are all options that are unique to each sphere, so just be aware of which sphere you have selected. Some of them are related to the mesh, while others are related to the FK controls you can make. First, we have radius A and B. This will let you scale spheres in the same way that we could in creation mode, either uniformly if we select them both, or according to one of two radii. The next one is radius blend. This will control the fall off of the mesh between two spheres. I'll switch to this guy. It's easier to see if you're looking at two spheres with differing scales. So this is a good example. We've got one large sphere next to two smaller spheres. So if we adjust this, you'll see that it's still adhering to the shape of the spheres, but it's just adjusting the fall off of sort of the volume between them. Next we have twist, and again this is exactly like the hotkeys we found in creation mode. It will turn the sphere and that will roll the geometry. The next one we have is divisions, and that will control how many lateral edge loops we get between two spheres. We can lower it or increase it. You can consider the evolve iterations here on the mesh control as sort of like a global subdivision, whereas you can consider this division more of like a local control. So the next three we have are, these three are mostly visual representations. Display axes, that will display the rotation axes of your sphere. And this will actually relate to the FK controls you can create. And we'll come back to that in just a bit. Draw mode lets you turn on or off spheres, just as a visual representation. And same thing with show connections. This will turn on or off the segments in between the spheres. So next we have all of these offset controls. And these are all related to the FK controls you can make. So let's actually make the FK controls so we can see a bit more what's going on. Now remember, we have display axes turned on this sphere. And if you compare the orientation of the accompanying control, you see that the axes are aligned. Controls are created to match the position and orientation of the spheres. And with these offset controls, we can adjust those. So I'm just adjusting orientation here. This might work better for this particular limb and give us sort of a better result when we're posing. And we can also choose to offset the position as well. So if I wanted to move it in a different spot, maybe I find a spot that, a different position that works a little bit better for where this joint needs to live in order to pose the character better, I can do that as well. And finally, we have this joint in between. I'm actually going to move to this sphere. Now this will adjust the roll division of the segment between, actually above the sphere you have selected. So as I adjust this, you can sort of see these red squares that are running along this segment of this joint, and I can lower it or raise it, and you can see it's adjusting. This will help how much we're dividing the twisting that happens to the mesh as we twist this control. So that about wraps up our walkthrough of all the features we have for Species. If you've signed up for our beta test, please feel free to try out all these tools and give us your thoughts on how they work, how useful you find them, suggestions for new features, or any feedback you might have. If you aren't on the beta test, feel free to sign up here. You should also find a link in the description of this video. We're hoping these tools provide a workflow that you'll find simple, fast, and also unrestricted. Our main goal is to remove as much of the technical work involved in creating characters and leave artists free to explore their own creative vision. In the next video, I'll talk a bit about where Species has been in the past and where we'd like to take Species in the future. Until next time, thanks for watching.